Hi, welcome to Kim's Art Show. This is episode 7. We've been doing a lot with gouache, one of my favorite mediums, opaque watercolor, very transportable and easy to clean, all the good things. I was introduced to gouache at Mass Art many years ago for a color class. It was called Color and Light. And as an artist, it's like you get very excited. Those are everything, right? Color and light. When you paint with gouache, it creates this beautiful matte finish that I always say is like velvet. And on the paper, it kind of like sits on the surface, and it is all about the color that it is. So it's a really wonderful medium to talk about color. So as I've made paintings these past 6 episodes past, it's all been kind of conversations about value and like a color story, and things that I would say made me think maybe, because it's Kim's Art Show, I can talk to you about color theory. Color theory is huge, but it'll help establish some things about what I might say in future episodes that you'll be like, I know exactly what she's talking about. So here I made a bunch of these fun little teaching tools. So this is our color wheel, right? And you'll know my circles are the primaries. Primaries are colors that cannot be mixed from other colors, right? So you have yellow, red, and blue. If you look at these colors though, I don't have one particular color, right? Look, my blue is 2, my yellow is 2, and my red is 2 colors. And that's because, as I was taught, and art is such, like there's so many different ways of interpreting things. So this is what I was taught, and this is kind of the best practices that I know, is primary colors are a theory. Also, we all see color so differently that there's differences of yellows, blues, reds, and for our sake, we're going to talk about them in terms of warms and cools, because color isn't, I'm going to go buy blue, it's I'm going to buy blue pigment, and what are the pigments? And so artists know certain colors by their pigments, and so we'll talk more about that. Not yet. So we have the primaries. 2 primaries mixed together make a secondary. And I make those triangles, just so very visually here's our color wheel with the primaries and the secondaries. I keep it simple like that, but when you mix 2 colors together, a primary and a secondary, you end up with a tertiary. Of course, I always want to say it's a thirtiary, but that's not really a word, right? So we'll leave that there. We're going to do color theory though. So when we talk about color, gosh, it's so hard when we look at a catalog. Oh my gosh, I'm so dating myself. When we look on a website and the colors are called things like bottle or maple, right? We have ideas of what those colors are, but artists don't do that. We don't say, like I wrote some down, Loden or sage, for greens. We would say viridian or sap or terra verte, right? And so when we talk about color, we always have these attributes. And the first is hue, not Hugh Grant, right? But hue here for color. That's the outward appearance of a color, right? So this hue is blue and this hue is blue, right? They're different blues, but the same hue. Value, lightness or darkness of a color. I throw that word everywhere, right? When I paint. This is a value scale, and it shows 1 through 9, all the variations of lightness or darkness. And you can make value scales of every color on your palette, from light to dark. Chroma. Depending on who you work with, it might be saturation or intensity. And I say chroma because it sounds the most scientific-y fun. And it obviously feels like color, right? But it's how much of that color is in a color. Chroma. Now, when I've taken classes, Sometimes they only talk about these three, but I find temperature to be very important too. And it's subjective, but it's a judgment of warm or cool. So back to my color wheel, right? We have the yellows. This is a cad lemon. This is cad yellow. Cad is cadmium. Don't eat it, according to my chemistry studied brother or anybody. But one is warm, one is cool. And that's that subjective thing about like the colors of the sun and fire are warm. The colors like that we see in ice or, I don't know, like on a shady day, those are cool. Here, well, let's cut over to here. We have alizarin crimson is a cold purpley red, and then cadmium red is a warmer red. And then in blue is the hardest one. And I've read books that say the opposite, but it's going to be whatever works in your head. But it's cerulean is more of like that sky blue color. To me, it looks like green. And because it leans toward green, it's cool. And then this is ultramarine, and it's known as French ultramarine. And because I'm French, it's like my favorite color. But French ultramarine is almost purple. And so the reason that you want to think about temperature is that when you mix colors, you'll get beautiful purples if you mix the blue that leans toward purple and the red that leans toward purple, right? So, right, there we are. What are the attributes of color? Hue, value, chroma, and temperature. So when I'm mixing color for a painting, I want to say like, oh, I'm painting the sky. What color do I need for the sky? I make judgments. It's blue. It's how light or dark. How intense is it? And is it warm or cool, right? And so when I teach, I make people say, you know, like, oh, this color isn't right. Well, what are you looking for? What's wrong with that color? And it's these attributes, okay? That's kind of heady stuff. I love it so much. So we have the primaries. Remember I said it's a theory. You can't go to the store and be like, I would like red. No. You can. There is something called primary red, but it's your version might be different than what that company says, right? Secondaries are two primaries, orange, green, and violet. I was taught in art school that purple isn't right. Purple is one of those colors like Loden and bottle, but violet is the appropriate color. Tertiary, right? That's primary mixed with secondary. All right, new terms. Here you have a color, you add white to it, that's called a tint. You have the color, you add gray to it, we now have a tone. You have your color and you add black, you have a shade. And fun exercises for when you want to feel like I'm going to paint, but I am not wanting to paint something. Doing color exercises makes a lot of sense. Let me move that. Right, so here we have tints, pigment plus white. We make a nice gradient. And if you want, you can make like little squares and paint like here's the color, adding white, adding white, adding white, much like this until you would end up with the pure color and then just the pure color plus white, just the smallest amount of color there, right? Shade, right? Pigment plus black and the nice gradient. But here's a nice collection of tints. I taught a class on color. We bought an inexpensive set of gouache. These were all the colors in the gouache. And we played with, here they were, out right out of the tube, and then moving them toward white. And you have such beautiful colors in the tints. Don't call these pastels, right? These are tints. Pastels is home decorating, or the stick of pigment that's a pastel. See how it would get confusing. Here are shades. So colors right out of the tube, and then adding black and watching how they get muddled in the middle. All right, so that's a lot of information. we're going to move on to complements, right? So in our color wheel, is that going to stay? Sort of. Complements are opposites. So I have mixed, oh, I might be able to do this. My handy, yes! This is a French easel. I've had it forever. It's really beat up, but it's very dear to me. It's gone all over the place, been on planes, so I use it. So you'll see, like, we'll start with red. There's the warm and the cool. So I mixed the warm and the cool, and those are the complementary colors of the warm and cool. And then with the yellow, and then with the blue. And so primaries always have a secondary that is its complement, right? Because we're going across on the color wheel. Now, you'll know that these color combinations kind of are jazzy, but they're familiar, right? This is Christmas. This is Easter. This is like a bunch of like high school or college or team mascots. They all design within this because those colors are very active together. So I'm always talking about best practices. So in art school, when I was taught to paint, this is how we were taught to set up our palette, right? So we always had the palette like thus. Even if it was one of those traditional wooden ones with the hole and you'd feel all painty with a smock, right? It would be set up the same way. White, then the warm and the cool yellow, the warm and the cool red, the warm and the cool blue. So in theory, you could make any color with those. Those are your primaries. But we do add in a warm and a cool green, some nice neutrals here, okay? And for artists who are watching, or those who want to go buy some colors, this is Viridian. What a fun name. This is sap. This is burnt umber. You can buy raw umber, but burnt umber is a prettier color, just like you can buy raw sienna, but burnt sienna is a better color. Like, it's just warmer. And in a prior episode, I talked about how we want things to feel warm because they feel cozy. Depends on what you're painting. I don't want to paint things that make people uncomfortable or jarring. Like, that was what I did in art school many years ago. I want to play with these warm colors, and I want to play with paintings, right, that make you feel that it's inviting you in and it feels warm, like a hug. And so when you set your palette up the same way all the time, then you're eliminating some of the thought, right? And I don't think I went over, but these colors are cadmium yellow. This is cad yellow medium, cad lemon, cadmium red light. These are going to be very expensive colors because cadmium is expensive and they are very highly concentrated. This is alizarin crimson. What a fantastic word. When I first started painting, I called it alizarin or something, but alizarin crimson, gosh, beautiful. Cerulean, and then ultramarine blue. Quick note. I had talked about color theory, right? There's the hue, the outward appearance of a color. So that's the color theory name for hue. When you go to an art supply store, you're going to be like, cerulean blue or the cadmiums are so expensive. So on the display, there'll be cerulean blue, and it'll be so expensive. And then next to it, in a tube the same size, will be a cerulean that is so much less. And that's called cerulean blue hue. And cerulean blue hue has nothing to do with our color theory hue. In this instance, it's a marketing term, meaning, hi, we're a paint company, and we took all kinds of blues and other colors and mixed it together to find a color that approximates what the genuine is. So sometimes you might have that first color, cerulean, say cerulean blue genuine, and then next to it will say cerulean blue hue. When you can, buy the genuine, because you're going to learn to make mixtures, and if you make a mixture with the hue, the mixture is going to get muddied, and you're going to be like, why does it look like this? And it's because there are other colors interacting together. All right, so this is your Impressionist palette. It's going to be joyful, bright, sun-kissed, crazy, nature-based. There are alternative palettes. When I am painting and then I'm like, nothing is coming out well, I do something like mix up my palette. These are some gorgeous alternative palettes. And see, in each instance, we have a white, because these are opaque mediums, yellows, reds, and blues. And these are very classic palettes because, you know, it was only during the Impressionist era that tubes were invented. And so to paint on location was nearly impossible. And before every painting session, you would have to mix your pigment or grind your pigment and make your paint. So you were staying with these very earthbound, easy to find colors and smaller amounts of them. And painting on location was a nightmare, right? So this palette is known as the Zorn palette. And so if you haven't been to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum and you're nearby it, go and look at the paintings by Anders Zorn. He painted all of them with these four colors: white, yellow ochre, vermilion, which is kind of like cad red light, very orangey red, and ivory black. Ivory black was his blue. And I'm telling you, paint with these colors, gorgeous. Google right now, Zorn palette, and you'll see these gorgeous color spreads of what those can create. Shocking, beautiful, subtle, beautiful flesh tones. So when I painted in France, my professor was from RISD for part of one of the classes. And she told us to paint with white, yellow ochre, red oxide, which is derived from making iron rust and then peeling that away, right? So you know that color. It's kind of orangey, stainy, funky. And ultramarine, that color I love. Beautiful tones. I painted a blue pitcher with little cherries next to it. Ah, it was such a fun painting, and I sold it so that I could spend some days in Paris. I still miss that painting, and it was with this palette that I had never used before. And then this is much more of a traditional palette, right? Yellow, red, blue. And in theory, these you could go to an art supply store, and let's say you looked at the Winsor Newton display, a great company for paint. They would have Winsor yellow, which is going to be their approximate palette color of primary yellow, Winsor red, and Winsor blue. And that's what you would be painting with. And you end up with something that's very believable, very pretty. But it's a nice way to mix it up. And maybe next time for another episode, I can do an exploration in another palette. I've done this before where I've been like, everything I paint is junk. I have to do something different. And if I don't mix from gouache to another medium, which of course can happen, I might do something like, here's my gouache palette, right? I have been playing with this one and it has tons of colors, but you can see it's kind of based on the Impressionist palette plus more, okay? But I also bought another set. This was one of the first sets that I had bought. The same Himi brand, okay? It's this gross blue color And of course, color's relative, so you have to kind of learn to look beyond this crazy blue. And then look, it even comes with this mixing palette. You can't mix color on blue. You don't know what colors you're getting. But I've used all the colors eons ago. So these colors are all high quality, beautiful paint that I have mixed. And in essence, this is the Zorn palette plus colors that I need. So I have 2 whites, a yellow, the yellow ochre, that's my like vermilion, and ivory black, right? So every once in a while, I'm like, I can't paint anything with all the colors available to me. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna rein it in, simplify, and paint with these. These colors are just fun. Sometimes, you're doing something and everything is hard, so you give yourself a little treat, like maybe I'm gonna go to Starbucks and get a new coffee and that'll give me a little jump. Or maybe I dropped my daughter off at college and now I'm sad, but look, there's an art supply store around the corner. I might buy these kinds of beautiful colors. And gray is just a cheat. I can mix gray, sometimes it takes too long, and I just want to mix gray into another color and see what happens. And remember, gray plus the color is called a tone. So I'm going to close that up. If, let's say, you buy one of these sets that has all these beautiful colors, when it arrives, the colors are not in this order, but I moved them into this order because it approximated the palette that I knew, but in this shape, because I don't want to have to think about it. I want to know my warm colors are together, my cool colors are together. So I have some other notes. Oh yeah, value. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So it was fun to make all those little color study ideas. So this is our value study, right? Light to dark. Good paintings modulate from light to dark. A lot of people, when they paint, they start with, what's my lightest light? What's my darkest dark? Usually you don't go to the darkest or the lightest at that time, right? Because it can feel a little bit too jumpy, too high a contrast. Nature's not necessarily like that. And so you might play into these kinds of ranges. And then at the end, doing the little cake decorating of the fun stuff, you dot in some very dark darks and some very light lights. If you go to the museum or a gallery, you'll notice white is used very sparingly, but often to great effect. Black similarly. So artists love to say, value, lightness or darkness of a color, does all the work, but color gets all the credit, right? You can almost view these at a party, right? And color's like, look at me, and value's like, right? I do all the work. But if you get the value correct, then a painting can read. And read just means make sense. So this is a value study of the former airport in my town, and lights and darks all in grayscale, okay? Then I said, what would happen if I changed up the colors? Let's do it. We'll start with real first. So this is what it looked like. And this is known as local color. Local color is the color that it is, right? Not necessarily influenced by other colors around it, local color. Then I was like, well, let's do warm colors that touch each other on the color wheel. That's known as analogous colors. So we have the warms and the cools. Da-da-da. So there's the same painting, but now just playing in the warm side. But like you'll notice, there are some violets in there, but they're red violets, so I am definitely skewing toward warm. But because I got the value correct, you can still meander through the painting and feel it as believable. And so guess what this last one is? It's cool, right? so interesting. I love this one. This one makes me want to do it bigger and like hang it in my bedroom, right? And it just goes to show, like, all those preconceived notions that we have about color are based in some reality. That would I ever hang that painting in my bedroom? Like, I don't know that it would be restful. It's fiery, right, and warm. But this is tranquil, very nicely relaxing. So color is just such a huge topic, and I love talking about it. In fact, my bio at one point talked about how I loved to discuss the science of color. And so, this is a small version of a painting that I've worked on, and it's like there's so much color study in it that any exploration that you do of color has great benefit. Color in relation to one another is also so fascinating. And the baggage that we bring to color is really interesting. In that same color class that I took many years ago at Mass College of Art, the teacher came in with this stack of what's called color aid paper, and it was basically like silkscreen paper of 240 colors. And it's a very expensive box of gorgeousness. And she put them on tables, and we were divided into groups. And as a group of maybe 4, we each got a packet of a portion of those colors, and we had to put them into piles, pretty and ugly. And you can imagine how subjective that was. And we ended up having so many little quabbles about, well, why is that color ugly? And it all had to do with associations, It was an ugly green that felt like fatigues, and that person had been in the army and didn't have a good experience at basic training or something. And then someone else loved another color that we might not have liked, but it reminded them of some memory of their childhood. So it is pretty remarkable how much baggage we bring to color. I think I have enough time to tell this crazy story. Let's see. Years ago, I worked at a gallery in Beacon Hill, and a woman came in, and she was so cool. And as we talked, I found out that she worked for a home dec company, and she was a colorist. What is a colorist? Well, a colorist is someone who says, oh, well, artist, I like what you've done, but let's punch up the reds in that, and let's tone down the blues in this. And I was like, wow, that's remarkable. So where are you from? California. Why are you here? Mass Eye and Ear. Oh, I'm not going to push. But then she told me that she has been given some sort of transplant in her eye, I think like the lens. When she woke up from surgery, she could see color so differently. And it just drove home, wow, color is so relative. We all see color so differently. I wish it had been in the days of social media, because I would have loved to still have a contact with her. But at the time, many years ago, I wasn't going to be like, hi, I just met you and we talked for 10 minutes. Can I have your number or your address? I just hope she's doing well, whatever she's doing, and enjoying color. And I hope you found this informative. I'm going to go have something to drink. It was a lot of talking, but I do love it so.